Hi, everybody. This is Alex. Glad to see you all back. We've got a special treat to start the evening tonight. Jorge Restrepo from Mexico sent us on a trip through Orion. It was part of the Orion time, but it was a video and it didn't fit Orion time itself with still slides. Molly's going to show that right now. So Molly, if you could just take that over and show us Jorge Restrepo's voyage through Orion.
All righty. We're back, Alex. And I muted you. Alex, I muted you. You got to unmute yourself.
I don't think it hears you.
I do. Okay, I'm back. Thanks, Molly, for taking care of that. Molly's in charge of the technical aspects. By the way, Molly could use an assistant on this. She can show you how to do it. I mean, if Molly can do it, anybody can do it, really. So just, volunteer, because we need somebody to help us take it from the presentation and get it out on the web.
You need to have an internet connection and some computer savvy, and I'll teach you how to do the streaming bit.
Yeah, right. And we need more people to do this because we can't always be here all the time. So we need some help with this. I got to share my screen right now, present now on this particular piece of work, my entire screen, boink, share. And now I need to go over to, yes. Oh, I didn't mean to be here to start with. I meant to be at home because you'll notice that the front page has changed of the website. On the front page, it says the astro-imaging channel, like it always has, but now we've got Gorgeous Galaxies has replaced the Orion time. And we've made a special page, a special section on the website just for these kinds of projects, for Orion time and stuff like that. This used to be Orion time, and now it's Gorgeous Galaxies. And the rules are the same. There aren't any rules, okay? You can turn in a movie or a still. And by a movie, I mean something short, 10, 15 seconds, where you kind of you see some movement or a GIF or something like that. That's fine. And if it's too big you can send me a link to the box or something to a Google Drive, and I can pick it up and try to get it in. Jorge's was too big, and that's why we couldn't put it in the regular program. And we're not really soliciting works like Jorge's for gorgeous galaxies. We appreciate it, but I just had to show you it. It was so good. Anyway, this picture has to be taken, this apparition. Now with galaxies, an apparition is like a whole year because there's always galaxies up. It's not like Orion, which is only up for part of the year. Oh, that says January 30th. That's not going to work. It's supposed to say June 30th. We'll have to get our webmaster to fix that. I'll make a note to myself to do it in the morning. Anyway, by June 30th of 2021. A JPEG or a PNG, make it at least 1080 pixels on a side. We need it to be that big. Otherwise, it kind of deteriorates when we start putting it in the movie. Tell us your name, email, equipment, and comments. As you can see, not much of that actually goes into the show because you've seen the show Orion Time last week. Not much of it actually goes into the show, but we use it to help identify people that really know what they're talking about. And we may be, we've got other reasons. We hope someday to have some of you guys come on and show how you took some of these pictures. Then you click here to submit a file and it'll go to your email server and it sends it to you. You'll notice also we've got 2 other areas. This is where we're going to be putting all of these projects. Remember Comet NeoWise on parade? It's here. Orion Time, if you missed it last week, it's right here. And by the way, I should say that we misspelled Euripides. Please excuse us, Euripides. I make lots of mistakes. I try to catch them all before they go. This one I missed. Anyway, this last little part over here, help wanted. We need help in this, okay? Look, we've got an email address. It's a special email address called TAIC shots@gmail.com. We'd like to have somebody besides Eric, me, Terry, Molly, besides us working on this kind of a project. And all you'd need to do is kind of accept the emails, copy the file, eventually put them into a PowerPoint and help make them into a movie. And we can show you how to do all that stuff. I can do that. I've done that. And it's not that hard to do. And it's kind of fun to learn how to do it. So if you want to help with that, click that button and it'll go to your email program and that'll start that. Okay, Gorgeous Galaxies is the next project that we're going to be doing. And please get on doing that. Now, next thing I want to do is go to the calendar where we've got Sean Maloney. He's going to talk today about how to store the data. And then Danny Perry's coming in next week. He's gone up to Alaska recently, and he's been up there before. And so he knows a little bit about Aurora Borealis hunting. And he'll help you plan your trip for next year because it'll be better next year. And as you can see, we've got a number of other people coming in. We're scheduled all the way up to May, I think 16th there. Okay, so we've got a good schedule, but all of this depends upon you. So please hit the contact button, tell us who you are, and tell us that you'd like to come share with us. But at any rate, sitting in the room, while I'm here, make sure that you put your comments in over here and your questions. Ask Sean if you've got any questions about how things are going or what they're doing and stuff like that. If you have anything nice to say. If you haven't yet subscribed, we sure would like you subscribing. We're glad that we're above 10,000 now because that gives us some privileges, like we can make these T-shirts for you and things like that. We couldn't do that before if you'd like to get into a T-shirt. And don't forget, if you're going to ask a question, somebody said they were going to put the question mark thing up here and they haven't gotten to it yet. There it goes. And be sure to put a big question mark like that.
Please.
Anyway, enough of this drivel. Let's get to the star of the show. And I'm going to stop presenting. And Sean Maloney is over there and he's all ready to go. So Sean, you can unmute yourself and start your presenting. Take over.
I'm going to click present now, right?
Yep, present now. Be sure you click on the screen that you're presenting with, on your entire screen. There you go. You're starting. Red stick's presenting, and you're presenting us because that's what we are. Now you're
all right.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's go here.
You're on.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. It's been a long time. And thank you, Alex, for letting me come back. Tonight, we're going to talk about file saving and what to do with these files. The structure I'm going to go through right now is a file naming pattern, creating your files so that you can understand what they are when you shoot them, capturing and transferring those files, types of cards that are great to use, and then something I call a process folder, which we'll get into a little bit later, saving those files, and then wind up somewhere around the block of backing up and archiving those files to protect them. So I'm going to leave this screen up for just a second, but tonight's presentation, it's going to look at, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of astrophotography, and that's your file generation and your file handling. I know that when you started that you're trying to overcome all sorts of obstacles like balancing and polar alignment, focusing, guiding, capturing. But when you get right down to it, what you have in the end is what is the most important part of the night, and that's your data files. So on this particular presentation, it's going to be geared more towards the newer folks, but that's not that the more seasoned imagers cannot glean some new information out of it, or even maybe give me some tips on what I'm doing. And but I think we'll all benefit if we just talk about it. So here's my little disclaimer. Let me preface it by saying that there are all kinds of ways of doing this sort of thing, and that my way is by no means the only way. This is just what I have evolved for me over the last 6 years, and it's a constant work in progress. And I continue to discover new ways of doing things and new ways of structuring it. And I tweak it from time to time so that it gets better. And I have some things right now that I'm trying to figure out how to deal with, and I'll get to that later. But when I first started out shooting, I was so busy trying to learn how to capture images through whatever means I was using that I never gave any real thought as to what I would do with the files once I had captured them. And let me tell you that once you get a year or two under your belt of shooting, they stack up, and that's no pun intended, and they get uncontrollable. So I'm going to drop down here for a quick second. Let's see. And I'm going to bring this up. I guess y'all can see that. Let me go over the settings. So when I first pardon me, I'm sorry, that's not it. I remember reaching out to a lot of people when I first started. This is what's called backyard Nikon, backyard Canon. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar. This is what we use. A lot of us used when we first started out. We were on DSLRs, and it's a great program. It really is. But when I first started learning it, I didn't really understand, what I was doing and how you're going to keep up with the images that were coming out of it. For that matter, how you even identify them from one another. So I would call people and I would say, how are you differentiating between your images? So let's just say you shoot a picture of the Lagoon Nebula, and then you might switch over to something different, Orion or something. And in the morning, you get up in the morning and you don't know what, all you see is just these files, but you don't know what they are. And at the time I didn't know anything. And so I was having such a difficult time figuring out how to differentiate between them. So, and I would ask them and they would say, just go look at the file path. And I didn't even know how to formulate a question because I didn't even know what the file path was at the time. I think they thought that I was just kind of a knucklehead, and they're like, look, man, look at the file path. It tells you everything you need to know. But the problem was I didn't even know how to make that file path. And if you look here on Backyard Nikon, and I'm trying to see where that is. I'm sorry, guys. There's a place to go in here and you can create where you can put in information and it will tell you where your, I had it up a minute ago and I for some reason, I just can't seem to find it right now, but that's not the point. But anyway, so what I finally determined was when I finally switched over and I got to SG Pro. So let me get out of this. And when I got to SG Pro, I had a light bulb moment. So if you go over here to the Equipment Profile Manager, this file, this blank screen right here has a key in it. And for those of you that use SG Pro, you'll see that you have all these little things that you can install into this file naming pattern. And it was a light bulb moment for me. For several months, I spent the better part of everything just shooting DSLR, and all I would see was like CR2 dash and a string of numbers, but I didn't know what it was I was looking at, and it was very confusing. So flash 4 months later, I got into CCD imaging and using SG Pro, and I finally stumbled onto this file path naming portion and suddenly realized that this is what everyone that I was asking these questions to, what they were referring to. So if you take a look at the screen, you'll see that you're able to just insert these characters in there, and there it tells you down at the bottom how to put them in, and it will incorporate all of that information into your file path. So no longer did I just see CR2 dash whatever, but now I had real information. Now I could see all the information that I need to know in order to differentiate between the files. I can see the target name. I can see the camera. If you get out of here and just click on one, let's see, like this one. See, this is where I entered in target name, all the different information. And what it does is when you pull up your files in the morning, whatever you decide to choose out of this key, and it gives you a ton of stuff, the temperature, your camera, the target name, what number it is, all of that information is there. So when you look at your file in the morning, you know exactly what it is you're looking at it, and no longer are you confused as to what it was you were looking at. So I hope that makes sense to you. But anyway, so now I had a clear path on how to open the file of data gathered the night before and know what images were, what filter they were shot with. And this made moving those files into the proper folder so much easier. So this takes me to the first part of your night. It's time to start capturing files for your images. And what I like to do is I like to use a 500 gig SD card rather than storing them on my hard drive. So let me jump back over here real quick. Bear with me. And this is a scan disk. I don't like to cram all that data. I'm using a Microsoft Surface Pro, and they don't give you a lot of file storage space on that computer for my capture computer. So you have to do something. This thing stores 500 gigabytes of data. And this is the one that I use. And I get them from Amazon. They're not super expensive. This particular one is made by ScanDisk. It works great. They run, I just checked it today, they run about $107 for them. And it also serves as a secondary backup for my files. So once I fill up one of these cards, I might have literally 40, 50, 60 targets on this card. And I just simply purchase a new one, and then I just store the old one, I label it, and put it on the shelf. And I'm going to get into storage and backup in a few minutes, but that's your first means of storing some of your data. So depending on what type of computer you're using, which in my case is a Mac for processing. I'm a Windows guy. Everything I do is on Windows, but for my processing of my images, I decided to use a Mac Pro. And I bought it and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I love it. It does great, but there's a learning curve to it. But I just transfer from the ScanDisk to my processing computer. So I'm sure that everyone here has their own way of gathering up their data each morning, but I find this works great for me, and it's easy. It keeps me from making mistakes. I don't have to use a crossover cable or any kind of weird transfer functions. I just pull the card out of the laptop in the morning, plug it into my Mac, and I'm done. So once you have named your files, like we showed you earlier, and I do know that SG Pro, for this presentation, I'm using SG Pro and PixInsight as my references, but I've looked through a lot of different capturing software. They all give you the option for file naming. And so you can, it's not just SG Pro. Backyard Nikon had it. I just didn't read the manual because I'm typical of me. But so once you've named your files and have shot your images on your SD card, it's time to start dealing with them in your processing computer. So at first, I just made here I got to jump over again, y'all. Oh, sorry. I would just make a target name, and I would just dump all my images into that target. Well, that wasn't working for me. So but once I started using PixInsight, I realized that if I created a filing system that mirrored my workflow in PixInsight, that things would go a lot easier. So I started creating my own filing system on the Mac or Windows in order to keep up with my many different scope and camera combinations, and then creating what I called a process folder. And that would reflect my PixInsight workflow and just dump the newest target into there. So let's look at this and have a look at how all that works. So here's last year, 2020. And if you look right here, I have all of my telescopes listed first, and then I have a camera associated with that scope. So, you know, I might have two different cameras I use on my RC8. I have a couple of cameras on my Red Cat. I have 4 that might go on my GT71. You know, I have several different ones that you could choose from. But anyway, and just so you know, each year I've learned, start with the year. Don't try to cram it all into one file. For me, it works. 2021. Here's this year's, and I don't have anything in here because I really haven't shot anything this year because I've got too much to process. But this is where I'm going to work out of this year. Last year, it was this one. So if you go to the 690 and click into it, you'll find the targets that I shot, and we're gonna dig into that. So the first thing, like I said, was I start by entering the year, and then from there, my next category will be the combination of scopes and cameras, like I said a second ago, which is right here. And at the top, you'll notice I have what's called process folder. And when you expand it, you will see my workflow for PixInsight in that folder. And I put these numbers so that I could keep them in order. I'm sure there's a way to tell it to put it the way I want it, you know, and not try to do it alphabetically, but, you know, I have just so much knowledge of computers, so the numbers worked. So I kept them in order for me. But if you come into, you come in the morning, you bring your images in, and let me back up. So what I do is I take that process folder, and let's go to 2020, and I just simply copy it and just put the process folder in, and I name it to whatever the target's going to be. And then when I go to in the morning and I get my data, I have this built in. And so all my HA-fits are there, and my O3s are there, and my S2s are there. And that way I can keep up with my files. And let's see, let me back up a second. So let me go to the process folder. So for those PixInsight people, I get my FITS data, and then, then you calibrate it, you register it. And each one of these has, a label in them for each one of your processes. And stack files, I really need to rename it to integrated. I did it so long ago, but in PixInsight, that's integrated. And then you go to your star line, and look, this is not the only way to do it. I'm sure lots of, you might use a drizzle method. You might use a lot of different things. So you might have to break within this, but I'm just following my workflow. And so I get cropped, and since I do a lot of DB or AB extraction, I do that, and then I come up with combinations. And typically on combinations, this might be show, and I'll put it as an XISF file. And when I'm finished processing everything, it ends up with the same thing, and I store it as an XISF file. Let's see. I like to use the frame and mosaic. I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but this year what I'm doing is I have, let's see, 2021. So I have here's my 2021 year file. And if you go to, let's say, RC8690, this is something new I'm doing. So I always keep a copy of this process folder because that's your target. So you just copy that, drop it in here. But what I've done now is I've created a rotation degree so that I can, if I'm shooting, I may be shooting a target, maybe 3 targets at 360 degrees during the month of April. And what I'll do is I'll go in this portion and I'll drop this, I'll create the 360 degree folder, and within that will be my target name. And that's where it's just a copy of that process folder. It's just renamed. And so I drop it in there, and then I gather up all my data. And like I said, it follows along with my workflow. Before I begin a session, let's see, let me back up. Now, something else that I want to show you, and I'm going to jump over to my Mac screen if it will let me do it. Okay, so the Mac has something kind of cool. If you notice these dots, what I do is once I get up in the morning, I pull that SD card and I bring it inside and I hook it to the Mac, and I go to copy my files. Let me go back to last year. Oh, that's a bad one. Sorry. I will put these dots. Let me show you something. If you click on the images, I'm sorry, right here. There we go. If you right click on here, you have these dots on the Mac. I don't know if Windows offers this to you, but basically what I do is when I bring my card in in the morning, I hook it up, and then once I copy those files, I go into the SD card and I assign all those files a red dot. And that way, the next night I go outside, plug in my card, and then I'm able to shoot all night. And when I get up the next morning, I can see the ones that don't have any red dots. Those are my new files. And so I don't have to fish around and try to find where my files are. I just grab the new ones, put them in the proper folders. I shoot mostly narrowband. I have a lot of light pollution, so I don't do a lot of LRGB out here. So I'm mainly dealing with high O3 and S2. But you can drop those full files into each file folder and put that dot. And then you can use your other dots I use purple for work in progress. You can just assign them however it is that you want to assign them to. Mosaics are a little different because you're shooting more than one image. And all I do is just, I'll create, let's see, I have one here. Yeah, like California 1 and 2. So what I'll do is I'll just create 2 process folders, and I mirror that in SG Pro so that when you look at the file folder in here's like I was shooting a mosaic of the Crescent Nebula. I'll name it Crescent Mosaic 1, Crescent Mosaic 2, and then you just copy those 2 folders into that folder. Then you just name them the same, and that way when you get up in the morning, you can just grab them and drop them in the proper folders. And all this is just a way of trying to keep your data in a logistical plan to where you can find it, because it gets very difficult a year down the road, and you go, what did I shoot that with? Where I want to add data to something, and how do I find it? But if you come up with a plan like this that fits your workflow, then it makes life, for me, so much easier. And so, like I said, for this year, I'm just, I haven't done too much, but, tonight I could go out and shoot my RC8 or my GT71, and I would take this rotation and I would create a process folder over here for that rotation, and I would rename it Orion. And then when I go gather the data, I'll just drop it into those categories. And then the next morning, bring it inside, red dot it all so I know it's copied, bring it back out the next morning or the next evening, and do the same thing over and over again until I get finished. And then when I go into PixInsight and start processing my data, it just falls along these categories. And it just and I keep all of this data. I mean, there's probably a lot of people that don't keep all of this stuff, but I do. And data is pretty, storage is not that expensive. So let's see, I wanted to jump over to, let's see, back here. So I wanted to touch on this because, it's going to make it hard because we had to make my screen much bigger. But when you go to save a file, and I like to save my files to various formats. So I wanted to touch on this. A lot of us use both PixInsight and Photoshop during the processing part of your image. So to my knowledge, Photoshop, I don't think can read an XISF file that PixInsight creates. So you need to convert it to a TIFF file. And I know there was a gentleman that came on last week and was asking about this specifically. And when you do this, a box is going to pop up. And so if I want to save this image, you got to convert it. So the first thing you got to do is you got to say, look, I want to go to Photoshop. So I want to work on it in there. So I need to save it as a TIFF file. And then you come down here at the bottom and you scroll down. And when you go click on TIFF and you say save, it's going to bring this box up. And you have to choose 16-bit integrator. And what that's going to do is it's going to change the bit rate on that file so that Photoshop can read it. And then I'm going to cancel because I don't need to save it that way. But then when you go into Photoshop, you open that file up as a TIFF file, do whatever work it is that you plan to do to that file within Photoshop, save it, and then bring it back into PixInsight. And what I usually do is open it up and resave it as an XISF file. And it's going to ask you, it's going to pop that box back up and ask you, and you're going to choose 32-bit and save it again. And then you'll have your work completed from Photoshop back into PixInsight, back to an XISF file. And then from there, you can do whatever it is you want to do with it. And then when you go to save your other images, and like I said, I like to save them to various formats in order to use them in other places. So JPEG is relatively small and can be used on the web. I like to save PNG files. I use those on AstroBin. But, just remember that the first save really should be XISF. And so you have a clean copy of your PixInsight work, and then you can go and convert it to whatever other format you like. I did forget to say something. When you go and bring your SD card, let me jump back to my photo. So when you go to save your files off this scan disk, if you decide to go this route and use something like this to save your files, trust me, take it from somebody who learned the hard way. Do not cut and paste those files from this device to your processing computer. Copy and paste them. Because if you get any snags along the way on your computer, and like I did, I lost a whole night's work because the computer messed up, and since I had cut and pasted it, I lost it. So it's not that difficult to just click on copy and paste. And that
Sean,
way, yeah.
You have time for a couple of questions?
Sure.
Somebody asked, do you have an automatic way to generate folder names for your system, or do you go in and create them and then just name them yourself?
I just name them. Once I build that 1 year thing, the only thing that I have to do is just grab that process folder, rename it to whatever target it is I'm shooting, and that's it. And then the next morning, I just dump all those files into my FITS file category, which I can go back to. And that's it. Yeah, I don't have an automated way at this point. I will say that it would be nice, because the longer this goes and the more years I go, I just can't remember, what scope I shot certain things with. So it would be nice if somebody came up with a plan or an idea so that I could create some sort of a database where I could query it and find, say I shot the Lagoon Nebula 3 years ago on my stellar view. I have to go out of memory right now. So that's the only kind of problem I'm having with this whole filing thing. But no, I do it by hand.
Well, I
So
actually have
you
have a comment to make. I saw your comment over on the chat, Molly. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so two things. First, as far as the database thing goes, so I keep a text file with every data set, and then and that has all the details in it. And then I keep a spreadsheet that's a summary of those text files, which is sortable. So I can what is everything I've taken with this telescope. And each of my data sets are labeled, like, let's say Lagoon Nebula. I have Lagoon 1, Lagoon 2, Lagoon 3. That way I can go to that spreadsheet and say, all right, my file name is Lagoon 3. What telescope did I take that with? And I go look at my spreadsheet, and it says I took it with my Takahashi. So that's really handy. And the thing I said was that, sorry.
That's a great idea. I'll have to get with you and try to figure that out. I'm doing pretty good just by getting it the way I am. I've had to work on it for a long time just to get it where it is. But yeah, that's great, because what I'm finding now is that as the years roll on, it's getting harder and harder for me to figure out where to find all of those files. I have got a great way of storing them now and keeping track of everything. But as time builds, you get more and more files. So that's a great idea. Did you have another question?
Molly?
Actually, yes, I have another question, Sean. You may be getting to this, but now you're generating tons of files. So maybe you start off with 250 megs of captures, and before you're done, you have several gigabytes in your system. How do you back that up?
I'm going to show you that next.
Hang on a minute before you go there. That drive that you were showing us, that SanDisk drive, that's a USB 3.
Hang on, I'm getting some interference. Try that again.
Yeah, that's a USB 3 drive. Okay, wait, that's me.
You're kind of scratchy.
Can you hear
Alex is asking, is that drive a USB?
It's a
drive?
USB drive.
Wait, I'm getting a lot of interference. Say
Okay.
that again.
Uh,
It's clear now.
no, just go on without me. I'm going to figure out where it's coming from. Oh, it's gone
He's
now.
asking. He's
It's
asking
gone.
if it's a USB drive, that drive that you're using, that SanDisk.
Yeah, it's USB 3, and
Now,
No,
when I'm in Windows, because what I do is I just save it on a thumb drive and then bring it home from my observatory, and bring it home, stick the thumb drive in, and I just drag and drop. So I don't have to worry about it disappearing on the original. Now, maybe Mac operates differently, but if I drag and drop, it stays on the original as well as shows up on the place I'm copying it to.
oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. You know, I'll have to try that. I've never tried it because
Okay.
I'm scared to mess up my files. But yeah, no, that's totally cool.
Yeah,
So-
try it with some file you don't care about. Then it's easy. And Molly, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You said you've got this spreadsheet where you can look everything up. How does the information get into the spreadsheet?
So I do fill that by hand. I've been
Okay.
kicking around the idea of there's a lot of automating scripts that I want to write that I haven't written yet. The only script I use, I use a batch script right now to create all my folders and to copy the template for my details, my details text file that has the telescope and whatnot. I fill in information myself, but I use the batch script to generate all the folders for me. And I may at some point write some code, probably in Python, because it's easy, to scrape those text files and copy that information to an Excel sheet or something else. But I haven't gotten around to doing that yet.
Okay.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah,
I'd like to
I'm
add
going to
one thing.
post a copy of that batch script in the chat for people who are watching the video. But yeah, scripting in Windows isn't too hard. It is still a little bit of Google. Or if you're into computer coding, I have a Python program that relabels all the temperatures in my files and rounds them off to the nearest 5 degree, and that's really handy as well.
That's
And
cool.
I've been planning on adding some other file name fixing operations and stuff like that. But yeah,
I'd
Now,
like to add a little bit about drag and drop. So drag and drop is actually treated differently than a cut and paste. Okay, that's why a drag and drop is treated differently than a cut and paste. That's why you're getting different behaviors. One has potential to lose files, but when you do a drag and drop, you are retaining the original. You do a cut and paste, it is a destructive operation, and if it does mess up in the middle, you can lose data.
Yeah,
That's
that's what
what-
happened to a couple of my friends and me. And so I just do copy and paste, and that way it leaves it on the SD drive. And then once that drive, I can get 40 target on a 500 gig drive when I'm on, So once I get that done, it's just and we'll get into it when I get into the backup and archiving, but it's just a little way of keeping up with my data. I don't go to it. I've never had to go to it, but I know it's there.
Okay. I want to take some time here to acknowledge that Dan Lowry has made some comments over there about what was the program that he uses that in black tie photography uses post haste to generate file structures. And what I'm saying is that if you are watching this on YouTube and you're not looking at the chat column, be sure to turn on the chat column, because the astro-imaging channel is an interactive thing. Everybody's participating in this. And so other people are having side conversations at the same time as Sean is carrying on with what he has to say. So take advantage of some of the really smart people that we've got watching.
Great. Yeah. And just remember, as backing up just a little bit, I built my little filing system, which is pretty much my little filing system. It's, there's a million of them, but I built it so that when I come into this place right here and I create, say, the lagoon, then I know that all my fits data is going to go in here. And then when I start processing in PixInsight, the first thing you do is you're going to calibrate. So when you calibrate, they go there. When you register them, they go there. And then when you integrate them, they go here, and you end up with 3 images, and then you star align them, and you crop them, and then I added the DBABE, and I'm sorry if other people are not familiar with PixInsight, but it just flows with my workflow. So for this night's thing, it really just kind of ends with the fits data file right here. But this is how I built it, so that whenever I go to a target, I've got the sequentially order of how I went through it once. So I guess what I'm trying to say is not only am I saving my files from the night shoot, but I'm actually saving them in a way that I'm prepping them for the workflow. And that way I can keep up with them. So then, if you go back, like I said, and look at last year's data, 2020, and go over here to, I don't know, why did shoot that one? Let's just go here. This right here would have been rotations. I screwed that up. But, here I shot a bunch of targets at 0 degrees, and I shot at 270 degrees. So what I'm doing this year is on my process folder. If you come down here, you'll see I have flats. And when I'm let me widen this out a little bit so you can read it all. So here's 2021. Here's all my telescopes with various camera combinations. And up at the top, I have that processing folder, which ends up becoming my target folder for everything I shoot, is renamed. Then underneath, I have a master calibration, and that's where I'm going to house the master darks and the master bias, super bias, whatever you're using, for each of these cameras. They're going to live there. And then when I go into a particular scope that I'm shooting, say I'm shooting my RC8 with my 690, and I'm shooting 360 degrees, this is going to end up being a list of targets at that degree with all the data, and then your flats will live right here. So I'll go in here and I'll create a HA flat, an 03 flat, an S2 flat for that target at 360 degrees. But I keep my master ones, off the, you can copy and paste them and move around in each one of your targets if you want to do that. But I mean, you kind of get convoluted after a while. But that's really what I've kind of done to kind of try to keep control of what it is I'm shooting. And so hopefully in the end, I'll end up having, just stacks of years, and they'll just pile up. And then like Molly said, hopefully she can help me get control. And then something else I wanted to add in too was I want to create a master folder of finished images. So in other words, I could take this file type, create a master folder, and then put the name of the target, and within that name of that target, each of these file formats, and then that way I don't have to go back and go to each and every single image when I want to pull together. Say I'm going to do a show, or say I'm going to whatever, and I just want to show my work. I don't want to have to go back and go to each and every single camera and pull it up and find that. So go somewhere in here, maybe for 2021, I could just go and say, hey, I'm just going to come in here and make a new folder, and I'm going to say, what is it? Master images. And then what I could do is I can create the JPEG and all of that. And then for that whole year, at the end of the year, everything I shot, I can go get my final image of each one and drop it into there. And that way I'll have one file to go to get all my images right there. And then just a little caveat on the side. But anyway, let me move on. Ding, ding. Where you at? Here, we did that, we did that, we did that. Okay. Please excuse me, I'm sorry. Sequence Generator Pro. This book is great. My friend William turned me on to this book, and it's got a lot of great information. So I highly recommend it if you're an SGP shooter. It's, to me, the Bible, and it's got everything you need to know about Sequence Generator Pro in that book. There's been a lot of editions about it out there, but that is a great book. And then I've gotten to be pretty good friends. I wouldn't say great friends, but I talk to Warren on occasion, and he's very helpful. He's a very nice person, and he's given me so much help. And he's got this book inside PixInsight. So between this and this, I can pretty much get all the information that I need to store my file. He gets deep into how to save files in certain formats and what things you should do and shouldn't do. He also has a great website called ip4ap.com. And it's just like that, IP4, like the number 4, ap.com. And there are some free tutorials on there that will take you through and teach you how to do a lot of stuff in PixInsight. But in the end, it is a paid thing, but it's like $4 a month, like $5 a month, not that much. But there is a wealth of knowledge. And Warren does a lot of the videos himself. And he talks real slow and easy to understand. And I've learned a ton. So between this book and Warren's IP4AP, there's a ton of information to help you learn PixInsight. Where am I going? Okay, so let's get to back up at archive. So we went over the file conversion from XISF to TIFF back to XISF. Okay, now there are a number of ways to store your video, and hard drives do not last. They will fail. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of when. So if you're storing all of your astro images on your computer, you're setting yourself up for disaster. And it may not come in the next year, but it's certainly going to come eventually. So you really need to think about trying to set up a way to keep your data protected. And there's a multitude of ways, but I'll show you the way that I do it. And my first line of defense is this Drobo backup system. It's a RAID array. It stores 5 hard drives. I forget what the total number of gigabytes that you can put in there. It gets expensive, but it's tough. What it does is it spreads out all your data over these drives so that if you lose a drive, you don't lose your data. You just plug in a new hard drive and it rewrites your data to that drive. So this is the first line of defense. Now, I'm a big proponent of I like solid state spinning mechanical things. They break, but solid state to me lasts a long time. And just like that card that I showed you back here, right there. Oops, sorry. This one, that's a solid state drive, and it stores 500 gigs of information on it. So what I did was I bought 3 solid state drives. I bought the Drobo, and there's other ones besides Drobo, but I've just enjoyed it. It's worked very well for me, and I haven't had any problems with it. And then it has a little dashboard that you go into, and you can set it up however it is you want to back things up, how you want it to be, if you want it encrypted, if you want. But basically, this is just your dashboard for it, and it's constantly monitoring it and showing you data and how it works. But here's the thing so the first question I think people are going to probably ask is like, okay, I got 4 solid state drives, I got a Drobo. So what does that mean? Do I have to go and dump all my information on each one of those every day. That's a pain. I'm not doing that. I wouldn't either. So I found, close this up, and I've been using it for years. I worked for a long time, and then I got into it for Astro, and it's free. Yeah, we're going to, and there's a couple of different ones out there, but it's called Good Sync, and it's free. They have a paid version, but please excuse me. They have a paid version, but what it does is, and I'm going to show you my screen in a minute, but what it does is let's say Drobo's your master drive, and then you have these other drives hanging out there off the edge. What it does is you set up jobs, and you say, every time I plug my SD card into my process computer, there's new images in to Drobo, which is where my file is, that the process folder file I showed you. It's going to, GoodSync's going to automatically take that information and it's going to populate it to the other drives. And if I delete something on a drive, it will delete it for you. And it works both ways. So I'm going to bring this back up, and I want to show you something. Let's see. No, we don't. Really good. This is a cutout of the Drobo drive. Now, I've got a red dot here because this particular drive is full. So it's fussing at me because it doesn't have any more room to put anything on there. But these are your jobs. And what you do is when you plug in, you can always come back and say analyze, and it will analyze this drive. And I have it set to changes only. And what it does is it sifts through your drive, and it only finds the changes that you made, and then it populates it over to all your other hard drives. So to make it easy, all you have to do is deal with your one drive that you dump your data on, and then GoodSync comes in behind you, and it populates it to these other drives. So I have 4 SD drives outside of Drobo, and it's dumping all that information onto those drives, so that if I lose Drobo or I lose an SD drive or whatever, God forbid, I have a way of keeping up with my data, and I don't lose 5-6 years worth of data. And there are other ways that you can do it. I mean, there's I know that Dropbox offers a service, AstroBin offers a service, but those are paid services, and I'm not doing that. Storage is not that expensive. So, and then like I said earlier, I have those SD cards that I use to gather my data each night, and I don't throw them away. I just fill them up and then date them and put them up, and it's not the greatest thing, but it's my data. It's there. So I would encourage everybody, as you continue to go down this path and start gathering up your data, don't trust one top or one hard, desktop box to save your data. That is a recipe for disaster, and you will cry when you lose a year of data. And it's a feeling in your stomach I don't want any of you to ever feel, because I've done it and I'm never going to let it happen to me again. And there's cloud storage too, so you can go that route too. So that about wraps it up, Alex, unless anybody has any questions.
I have a question, Sean. Do you have a backup for your backup?
No, I need to get something else off site. Because if my house burns down, then I lose everything anyway. So no, I have these SD drives, external hard drives, set up on the tabletop. I have my Drobo system. But no, if I lose the house, I'll lose everything. So that's another step that I need to figure out what I'm going to do with that data. I mean, I can put it on a disk and put it in a fire safe. There's a bunch of ways to do it. But to answer your question, no.
Okay, I've been following. I think we've got most of the questions that were asked. What we don't have is all the wonderful contributions people have been making all the way along. Sean, if you're finished giving us information, you can stop sharing your screen. We can see your face.
Sure.
Um,
Okay. Hang tight.
And so Eric, are we in fact, are we all caught up over there?
We're caught up on the questions, but you're right. There's been a lot of chatter about the subject that Sean's talking about backing up data and what people have, and including some of my own too.
And we
Actually, with backup, if the house starts to burn down, I've already decided I'm grabbing my RAID array first. The cats get left, but my RAID goes with me because they can burn the computer down, but that stores all my data.
I hear you.
Once a month, I physically bring a drive from the garage inside the house, and let it run all night, and take it back out and put it in the garage. Now, the garage is 100 and some feet away from the house. So, yeah, if the house burns down, the garage isn't going to burn down at the same time. So I do that.
The problem is, when you start generating all these files, for example, when you start using PixInsight and you use, say, the pre-processing script, all of a sudden you have triple the amount of data automatically, and those files can really add up quickly.
Yeah.
And if you do a lot of imaging, it becomes impractical to save it on the web for cost reasons and just for transferring data. So you really have to take something and put it somewhere else if you want to be absolutely sure.
Yeah,
you can't count on local backup if you're really paranoid, which I am, you got to just put it somewhere else.
Yeah, but you saw Molly's comment over in the chat about how she basically gets rid of all the processing files. I think she said.
I do a couple of things. I get rid of the pre-processing files, like calibrated, debayered, registered, stuff like that, and that helps reduce my file load. I back up onto external drives that generally live in a fireproof, waterproof safe. The safe isn't meant to be non-stealable; it's just meant to be fireproof and waterproof. And then I joined Backblaze, which allows you to back up an unlimited amount of data and get it whenever you want, and it's not very expensive.
You know what? I've used Backblaze before. It's just you run into problems with the amount of data, and let me tell you why. Perhaps you don't want to get rid of those pre-processing calibrated files. And I've had the experience myself because I started throwing them out. But then what happens if I want to go back and then I want to do a subset of some calibrated files, and when you want to register those files, you don't want to re-register registered files. You want to re-registered calibrated files because double registration reduces the accuracy of the registration. So it's not a good idea to throw those away.
Well, you can if you keep, as long as you keep your, so I keep a copy of my of the master flat and the master dark, and I could always go back and recalibrate and re-register on the files I had. And in my Excel, I make a note of which frame was the reference frame so that I can even have it be registered the same way. So I can, if I do go back and reprocess, I can just regenerate those files from the calibration.
Right. If you want to do it all over again, you're right. You can do it that way. But I think the better way to do it is to just get, space, hard drive space is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And,
that's what
and I think you're better off maintaining those files, because as soon as you throw them away, you want to go back, I should have saved that file. I should have.
Well, that, and if you go add data and stuff, I don't want to recalibrate everything. And like you said, storage is not that expensive. So, but I get it, Molly. I understand. I was thinking the same thing, but right now, I'm still at a point where I just keep everything.
Yeah, I'm 5.5 years into this hobby, and I already have 8 terabytes of data, and that's with throwing away the pre-processing data. It's just not sustainable, even with the hard drives.
Right. As you get a couple of years in, now, of course, this isn't a competition, but terabytes add up pretty quickly. I think right now I have 17 terabytes of data in total, especially when you start generating all these Photoshop files, it adds up pretty quickly. So array to array, like you had with the Dobro or whatever, or an elastic guitar, that's array to array. So you can hot swap out a drive, and then a secondary backup to protect that. That's probably your best overall strategy.
So I got the Drobo in place. Everything goes to the Drobo, and then I got 3 or 4 solid states back there in the background, and then GoodSync takes everything that comes in new from Drobo and dumps it onto those solid states. So it's just the solid states are a mirror of my Drobo.
And nothing is more tragic for us than all of a sudden something fails and you go, "Oh my God, I should have done the backup." That is a sinking feeling you do not want to have.
The other thing you have to worry about, I do backup for a living. That's just what I do. What you have to also do is make sure your backup's not accessible by your main computer. You have to jump some hoops to get to your backup data. Because if you get a funky little guy coming in and he flattens your box, he'll flatten your NAS. So you have to make sure there that you can't access your NAS. I've got several NASs here. I got a 24 terabyte there. I've got a 10 terabyte sitting there, but I can't access them directly. I have to go through some steps to access them, just in case I get hosed.
I'd like to hear more about that later.
Well, I think what he's suggesting is that you simply airspace. You could, literally you could unplug it and have it sitting there, but that's a good idea. I haven't done that yet, but that's probably a good idea too.
You should,
depending on your level of paranoia.
Because I look after hospitals and medical centers, right? So one of the things that happens in these is that the bad guys come in, they take control of your system, and they seek out where you're backing up your data, and they get rid of that, or they encrypt it.
Right.
Now you're in a position where you have to pay them money because all of your IP or your business is in someone else's hand. So what you need to do is have them separate. So it's not possible to get from the company network onto the backup medium directly. We have to do other things, and you should take the same approach at home, because no one is immune from getting anything. It's so very easy to pick up something.
It would be very easy if we just had a couple hundred megabytes or even a terabyte of data. But this, as Molly says, she has 6, I have 17.
Yeah.
These things add up very quickly.
Yeah, I've got a little bit as well, but I have it making sure I can't get to it directly. That's all I'm saying. Doesn't matter if you've got 100 meg, 300 terabytes. It makes no difference. You got to protect it.
Well, if you had 100 megs of data, you just put in a little USB stick and then take it out and stick it somewhere. But
a USB is not a backup, Eric.
No, I understand.
Three copies you would require.
If you have something that plugs into the wall of your network, it's a different story.
I do the same thing, Eric. I turn my Drobo off if I'm not doing it. There's no reason to let it sit there. I'm not adding files to it, so I just shut it down. But and same thing with Terry. I work in hospital all day. I do all of their camera and security work for the FMOL here in Louisiana, and we're backing up and stuff like that. But I'm not doing near what they're doing out there. They're so the information is so much more difficult because of HIPAA and stuff. But for my house, I just follow along with what Eric says. I just turn the Drobo off. Molly, are you scraping pencils together?
No, that's Terry crunching on something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
we have broccoli. We have broccoli.
Broccoli and carrots. I saw it.
There's one more thing about hard drive failure. You mentioned that eventually they will fail, but a fellow in this business referred to the U shape of hard drive failure, which means in the beginning they fail a lot, and then they go for a number of years with very few failures, and then at the end of their life, like 3, 4, 5 years, then they start failing at very high numbers. So you can count on hard drive failure not just randomly, but because they eventually will fail according to the U curve of hard drive failure.
Huh.
Or you can depend on them just failing. It's that simple. It doesn't matter when, they will fail.
Alex has got an off-site storage bin right there in his driveway. Just go out to the garage, put it in there. Works for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we used to keep our home video VHSs, and yeah, those were destroyed by being in the non-temperature controlled garage.
All right.
There is a question from Kenward here about any thoughts about CD, DVD, backup.
I looked briefly at doing Blu-ray because if you get the double layer Blu-ray, those can store 8 gigs per disc. I mean, if you're a casual astrophotographer, maybe, or you can at least use it to store your finals. But that's an awful lot of discs for multiple terabytes.
Right, we did it. Yeah. Now they do make some. I think they make some discs. Maybe Eric knows better than me, but who was it? The angry photographer guy. He was talking about some discs not too long ago that you could store a ton of information on that will survive some pretty catastrophic things. But I've never messed with discs. You know,
I think you can take all your CDs and DVDs and just skim them somewhere.
Yeah, just throw them in a river.
I mean, it was a
Okay,
great
kids.
idea at the time.
How we doing? We got any new questions coming in? I think
you got the last one.
Yeah. Okay. And there's certainly more to say. Hey, this is particularly one where anybody who's watching the show, you need to get on the chat area and watch the comments because there were a lot of comments that we simply couldn't sneak into the show. One other thing I have noticed is that there are ways to comment on all these YouTube videos and things. And if you're assuming that the presenter is actually going to watch these shows again later and answer the questions, I am not so sure that happens very much. So anybody, I mean, the thing that's distinctive about the Astro Imaging channel is that you can sit here and ask these questions as we go and things like that. We do a good job on that. I'm not so sure we do a good job afterwards. If you make a comment about seeing something that you saw, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago it was presented, I'm not sure anybody's going to answer that comment. So this is where you can get your stuff asked and do the best you can on it. Okay.
Well, I'll be happy to look for the next week just to keep an eye on it, see if anybody asks anything.
Yeah, well, yeah. Hopefully people do that, but there's no guarantee that's happening. This is just a
Right.
general warning, not about Sean's show, but about any of the shows we do.
You're right.
Okay, we're going to start wrapping it up, and next week Danny's going to be here to tell us about going to Alaska and taking pictures of the aurora borealis. And each one of you, it's galaxy season. Next week, that daylight savings time thing starts. But pardon?
I hate daylight saving time. Sorry.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay.
All astrophotographers hate daylight savings time because we got to stay up an hour later.
It is
Boo,
galaxy
daylight
season
savings time.
now. So get out there and take your pictures of the galaxies and have them in by June 30th. And when you guys get them all in, we're going to make another show. And we need volunteers. We need volunteers to do what Molly's doing, to help put together the Astro Imaging channel TAC shots, TAIC shots, like, you know, the Orion type thing. And we need volunteers to present. Sean did a great job tonight, and he's just a volunteer. That's all he is. Okay, he's just a guy, just like you guys are guys or girls, and he just wanted to do a show about how he saves data. Only one way to do it. That's Sean's way. Now, you may have a different way. You may have a better way. You may have a worse way. I don't know. You certainly have a way that fits what you want to do. But at any rate, we need your volunteers. So come on in. Now, we are going to turn it back over to Captain Molly, and she's going to take us out of here. So go take us out of here, Molly.
All righty. Have a good
Bye,
night,
sure.
y'all, and save your data.